yesterday, I think there was a little bit of a glitch with YouTube because it showed that I was going to be live in an hour, but it's 5 o'clock right now. So let me get a minute here to get situated and give everybody a chance to hop on and say hi. Let me know where you are. Hey Inga, thank you for joining me. I apologize for any mix-up. My YouTube video said I wasn't going to be live for another hour, but obviously I'm live at 5 p.m. Central Time every Thursday, so it was a little kind of weird. I will try and fix that and make sure that doesn't happen for next week and that we are on time and on schedule. So, for those of you just joining me for the first time, welcome. And for those of you that join me weekly, welcome back. Inga, you're one of my regulars. Welcome and thanks for joining me. So while I'm chatting here, if you have any questions, please feel free to comment. Let me know where you are. Let me know where you're watching. Krista, you're another regular. You're in Granbury, Texas, so you're just down the road from me here in Texas. It's a big place, so right around the corner is not too far. Hey, Hoglegs, another one of my local Texas friends. Alrighty, everybody, so hit that thumbs up and subscribe to my video if you haven't already. Hey, John in Monroeville, Alabama, thanks for joining us. Today is one of my favorite topics. Obviously, seeds are my favorite, but we're going to talk about soil. I am getting so many questions about soil. What kind of soil do you use? How do you use it? How do you build organic soil? And I'm going to kind of touch on all of those tonight. But before I get started, hey Val, thanks for joining us as well. Much closer than right around the corner. So we've got D-Light 2. Thank you in Knoxville, Married with Children in South Jersey. Awesome. Thank you for joining me, everybody, and welcome. So I was going to do a video on worm tea tonight. Not making it, but using it from the amazing ladies at KNC Worm Farm. They're sending me a big batch, but it's not here yet. So stay tuned for that. It's a dirty job, Mary. Someone's got to do it. You got it. But I am going to do a video specifically for using that, and it's not going to be live. So stay tuned for that. I've got a couple of videos planned that won't be live. They'll be a little easier. I can't do everything live. Hey, Alan, thanks for joining me. Another Texas customer here. So, yes, tonight we're talking about soil. I had an amazing soil delivery yesterday, maybe the day before yesterday. Inga says, looks like you found yourself a shady spot. Yes, I have a semi-shady spot here. It's next to the new garden, which is why I had the soil delivery to the other side of the road, other side of the property, where I'm going to be starting the new garden. I did post that on my social media, on my Facebook page, of kind of the clearing of the new garden. I don't get great coverage on yesterday. Vel knows when I got my delivery. I'm all over the place with so much excitingness going on right now. Okay, so let me talk about soil. Before I get started, in the description section of this video, you will find links to my comprehensive planting guide. In that comprehensive planting guide, you'll find my recipe on how to make soil. I will be adding to this. I never just throw the soil in the raised bed and then go from there. I generally add a couple things, my own special little touches, right? So in the description section, you'll find, like I said, the comprehensive planting guide has tons of information. We have a seed giveaway going on right now at marysheirloomseeds.com. You go to Mary's blog, you can enter it. It's free to enter. You don't have to be a customer. You don't have to buy anything in order to enter. It's free. And it ends March 31st, and I'll be picking a winner on the 1st. So, soil. Let's talk about soil. It's one of my favorites. I can smell it right now. The smell is intoxicating. There are studies that show that digging in the soil and the microbes in the soil have an almost calming, maybe not calming effect, but it's like an antidepressant, and it lifts you up, it builds you up. It's better than the alternative. So there's some extra positives that we can get naturally with some soil. So when I mentioned last Sunday that I was going to spend a couple extra hours in the garden, somebody said, well, I don't work on Sundays. And I don't consider the garden work. I enjoy my time in the garden. I enjoy the the benefits that I get from gardening, and soil is awesome. So let's talk about the different types of soil. So behind me here is a raised bed garden mix. It was pre-mixed, it was delivered to my property. You also have compost. Compost is not a raised bed mix. You can use it in a raised bed, but it isn't always broken down. I got a tree like blocking the sun a little bit. I'm gonna shift a little bit so I don't have the sun right in my eyeballs. So compost isn't the same as seed starter mix. It's definitely not the same as raised bed garden mix. So I'm gonna talk to you just the basics of bagged soil first. This wasn't bagged, but just to give you an example, not everybody has a giant soil delivery. So we'll talk about the different types of bagged soil. First, you have a seed starter soil, and that's fairly self-explanatory. It is what you're going to start your seeds in. It's not required to start your seeds in, but it generally has a lighter, fluffier composition. It usually is a mix of, say, peat moss, coconut coir, and perlite. Sometimes it has vermiculite. So that is going to be a nice fluffy mixture. You don't really want to start your seeds in compacted soil. So if you're buying a bagged mix and you're starting your seeds in it, a seed starting mix is a benefit. I tend to start my seeds, this year at least, in coconut coir and worm castings. It has done amazing. I've had plenty of people tell me you can't start seeds in coconut coir, and I disagree. But I also generally add some things to my coconut coir. I don't always have it just straight coconut coir. So something to consider. In general, like I said, a seed starting mix is going to be a mixture of some nice fluffy material. Now, you have potting soil. So if you're going to the local nursery and you're looking at a bag of soil and it says potting soil, what is it? Kind of self-explanatory again. Generally, it's going to be an all-purpose mix. It's going to be nice and soft and fluffy because you're going to be potting your seeds in it. It generally is going to have already some fertility in it, so maybe it already has some compost in it. Maybe it has, I don't know, maybe it has some manure in it or some sort of beneficial nutrients already in it, so it's not going to be garden soil, and I'll get to that in just a second. But potting soil is generally going to be also a little what I call fluffier. It's going to have better soil retention than, say, or I should say water retention than, say, a regular garden soil. So again, potting soil is pretty simple and straightforward. If you are going to be using a container garden or a raised bed garden, you can use a potting soil depending on what is in it and what the label says that it's used for. Now, compost, I mentioned earlier. Compost, you can generally plant directly in it, but not always. It really just depends. TN Bushcrafter, you're in Tennessee, I believe. I've done straight coconut coir. They are fine about 2 weeks after sprouting. Absolutely. I never have problems with coconut coir either. I'm just kind of adding that as an addition because I have YouTube, I have Facebook, I have social media at different places, and I'm always sharing the way I do things. And it's not like you have to do it that way, but there's always going to be somebody who goes, you're doing it wrong. And I don't really mind, but I did want to kind of add that there, that I do use straight coconut coir sometimes, and I do use a mixture sometimes with my seeds. I generally don't do everything the same year, every year for everything that I grow. So just keep that in mind. When you are starting seeds, you can always kind of mix it around and see what works best for you and for your garden and how you grow. So I mentioned compost. It generally consists of decomposed organic matter or decomposing organic matter. So you might find some more like wood chippy pieces, and it may or may not be completely broken down, so it may not be as fluffy if you're buying bagged compost. So keep that in mind. Hey Christine, thanks for joining me. I just mentioned about KNC Worm Farms worm tea we're getting. So we're not going to do a live video for that. We're going to do a regular video so that I can give you a little more information. Anyway, today we're talking about bagged soil. TN Bushcrafter says, yeah, I used to follow you everywhere, left Facebook a year or so ago. Yeah, a lot of people left Facebook. I'm on a bunch of other places that you can still find me. All right, so we talked about seed starter soil. Hey Lynn, thanks for joining us. We talked about potting soil. We talked about compost. Now I'm going to talk about garden soil. So if you're in your local nursery and you're looking for bagged soil, or maybe you're buying it in bulk, and I'm going to hopefully give you a little bit of information on the different types of soils that are available to you, versus, obviously what you already have in your ground. So garden soil is going to be more for in-ground gardens. So if you want to top off what you already have in ground, garden soil is great. It generally isn't as fluffy or light as, say, potting soil or container garden soil. I'll mention that in a little bit, in just a second. So if you are growing in ground and you need to add something to it, you can go with regular garden soil. You can find all kinds of different varieties, all different types of companies. I've been asked what I recommend, and I don't necessarily have a specific brand that I recommend. Inga says, with bag soil, do you know if the manufacturers that compose or the bags, this soil compost, are consistently getting their soils from the same sources? Now that I don't know. So that's part of why I'm going to tell you there isn't a specific brand that I recommend. I don't like to pick and choose people. You need to do your own research. And also you're going to find that you're going to have regional varieties available. So you're in Florida. I lived in Florida. I lived in California. I live in Texas. And there's going to be different brands in different places. I hear noises about gardeners buying compost and the compost testing positive for Grazon, or inconsistent results. I buy bulk, but I wonder if you know. So I don't know specific brands that have been positive for Grazon. I know there are a couple homesteaders that have had some major issues. I do know that I did research on where I buy my soil from before I purchased, so that I wasn't necessarily running into that problem. I have heard about the compost issue. So like I said, that's again why I don't recommend a specific brand. You're going to want to find your own information and research what's available in your area. Sometimes you can find co-ops that are doing compost and they're collecting different things from maybe they're collecting food from restaurants, maybe they're collecting manure from a certain place. So do your research, look at what is available to you locally before you go with a major brand. That's always the way I do it. The soil company that I use is local. They're less than an hour away from me, and I've used this company. I think this is my 5th delivery. It might be my 4th. I might be wrong. We've had a lot of soil delivered. We've built a lot of gardens. So again, do your research. You want to make sure that you understand what's going into it. And that's really important. You want to know the inputs that are going into your garden. So we talked about seed starter mix. We talked about potting soil. We talked about compost. And then I mentioned briefly garden soil, and that's going to be more for your in-ground stuff. Now, let's say you make a mistake, or not a mistake, you're learning, right? Let's say you buy a bag of garden soil, but you want to grow in containers. So you could just as easily turn that garden soil into potting soil with just a couple additives. You can take a bag of potting soil, you can take a bag of garden soil, you can add a coconut coir to it and perlite, and now you have the beginning of container garden soil. You can use container garden soil in raised beds. So just because maybe you misread the label and you brought something home and you're like, oh, scratching your head going, what do I do with this thing? Because I'm not growing in ground, I'm growing in containers. I have had tremendous success with growing in containers using that type of mixture. So you can play with it. You can kind of figure out what works for your garden and what doesn't. Inga says, perfect, thank you. I have a zoo nearby and I've been thinking of asking them. I'm sure they have poop. So keep in mind that not all poop is created equal. I do have a series, Crystal, I'll answer your question in a second. I do have an older series about getting the scoop on poop. Vel here, she commented earlier, I actually drove to her house. She didn't live that far from me, and I collected a couple buckets of goat poop, and I did a video on goat poop. I had a neighbor at the time. She had horses. I knew what she was feeding her horses and kind of the cycle there, and she would literally take a wheelbarrow, bring it over to my house, and dump that poop right in my backyard. And so I had some amazing manure available to me. So if you have animals, you've got livestock, you've got, now keep in mind, we're not talking about cats and dogs. Most of you that go live with me, you know I've got cats. I do not use composted cat poop. But I have used goat, I've used rabbit, I used chicken, I've used horse, and I've used cow. That's a pretty great mix of manure there. So keep in mind, you need to know the ins and outs of using manure in your garden soil before you get started with it. Some are hot, some are cold, some need to be composted for longer, some you can use right away. And Christine points out worm poop. You can use worm poop immediately in your garden. You can't use too much of it, you can't use too little of it, and it's not going to burn your plants. So Christine, I did mention earlier, you probably missed it, this year I started something a little bit different, and I've used, let me add that in just a second, Krista. Hearing animals behind me. I used coconut coir and worm castings for my seedlings this year, and they did really, really well. So just to give you a little added bonus there. So let me answer some of these questions. Is it true that rabbit and chicken poop are golden, the best? Number one, that depends on who you ask. And number two, I would say rabbit poop out of the two is garden gold. The reason being, please, if you're watching this video after I finish my live chat, please go back and watch my videos on manure. They are pretty awesome, and my friends laugh that I have this weird obsession with poop. I don't, but it's funny. So rabbit manure is considered cold. So in that sense, you don't have to compost it before you use it directly in your garden. Now, it can still cause problems if, say, you have too much urine in the straw. So you do want to use it with caution, but it's not something necessarily that you have to compost for a long time. Chicken manure, from what I understand, if it's not hot composted, takes months before you can use it in the garden. Now, again, everybody's got their way of doing things, and I am definitely no expert on chicken manure, but I can tell you that when I had chickens, what I would do is I would create a raised bed. I would take all the shavings that when I would empty out the garden, I would dump it in there and I would let it sit. And then when I was ready to use it, I would throw some soil in it. Several months later, I'd throw some soil in it, mix it together, and then top it off with another layer of soil. So that's literally like the lazy garden, the awesome garden way of using composted chicken manure, because I didn't have to turn it, I didn't have to flip it, I didn't have to worry about dealing with it. I just tossed it in there, let it decompose, throw some soil on it, and plant. Inga says, I'm thinking of getting some bunnies just for poop. I know people that have bunnies just for poop. So anyway, we're totally getting off topic of soil here, but thank you for all of this awesomeness, because part of adding organic matter to your soil, for those of you that don't have a problem with using animal inputs, is adding manure. You guys jumped the gun on me because that was going to be the last the last part of it, but it's totally fine. If you get me talking about poop, we're going to be here all night, all night long. All right, so container garden soil is my last added bonus here. There are some companies now that are coming out with container garden soil, and again, it's going to be a lighter, a fluffier mix than garden soil, which is or topsoil for that matter. Topsoil is not necessarily something that you're going to grow in a raised bed. Well, this chat went to the pooper. I love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Laughter is the best medicine, right? Well, second to gardening anyway, right? All right, so my personal favorite is a super easy mix. It's compost, coconut coir, and perlite. So if I was gonna take my homegrown compost and I would want to add some fluffy, some more organic matter to it, I do have some videos on making your own compost, which is super easy. Inga says, I stick the chicken bedding poop and all in a bucket and holes and then water. And yeah, that's another way of doing it. Absolutely. So let's talk about, before I finish up for the evening. By the way, if you haven't already, please hit that thumbs up, share the video, subscribe if you haven't already. I know. Belle gets to hear me talk about poop all the time. Inga says you ran the juices over the ground for the new beds. That's a great way of doing it. So adding organic matter. Speaking of poop, there are a couple ways you can add organic matter to your soil. Compost. You can add manure to your compost. If you've got a compost pile, or maybe you just throw all your manure in one area and let it break down, then you can add that. I have a video on just starting compost in your kitchen. So you don't need a fancy composter, you don't need any fancy equipment. You can take a bucket, you can throw all your kitchen waste in there, and then when it's done, toss it out into your composter, because my composter is way back there. And I don't necessarily want to finish up dinner at 6 or 7 or 8 o'clock and then take my kitchen scraps all the way outside. I really don't like going out here in the dark, because there's like wild things out here, right? So I throw all my kitchen scraps in a bucket, and it's a sealed bucket, so I don't have to worry about bugs and coming into the kitchen. And then when it's a little filled up, I take it out to the compost, throw it in there, and I'm good. After that has a time to break down, it's going to produce organic matter for your soil. I also did a video on different ways of adding organic matter to your soil, so check out some of my videos that aren't live. And one of them was do-it-yourself leaf mold. So simple. You literally just take one of my do-it-yourself tomato cages, put some cardboard on the inside, and then throw some leaves in there and allow it to decompose. If you want to be super ultra easy, you can pile it up into a pile and then use it at a later time, which actually I did on one of my sides of the garden. I just piled it up. It's not gonna go, well, it's Texas, it's gonna go somewhere, it's gonna fly everywhere, which is kind of why I did the barrel idea. But I did stack up some piles of dead leaves, and now they're just decomposing. At the bottom, I scraped it up. I kind of opened up the pile, and there were some beautiful decomposing leaves. That is the perfect makings for leaf mold. So I'm super excited about that. So wood ash is another one as well. Someone asked me, like, how do I think the question was, their soil was too acidic, and what could they add to their soil? And from what I read, wood ash, in moderation, you don't want to use a ton of it because you don't really want to overdo it on anything. You can use wood ash. So say you got a fireplace and you don't use chemicals, you don't use like accelerants. Say you have a pile of wood from trees that fell, or limbs that fell during the last freeze. Hint, hint, Texas. That was a lot of work to clean it up. So I have this pile sitting next to my dirt pile. I have a wood pile. So I will be burning that for wood ash, and I'll be putting those in my garden as well. Because yes, I could just leave it to decompose, but I do want to kind of add it to it earlier. Inga said, I saw a compost maker and compost accelerator. So yes, it's a thing, but I'm really a big fan of do it yourself and don't spend a bunch of money on stuff that I don't have to. But I will say this, if you don't have the space for a composter, if you don't have the time for it to naturally break down, yes, there are absolutely composters. You could buy a compost tumbler for $100 or $200 or $300. You could use a barrel or a bucket that's $5, or free if you have cats and you have cat litter boxes that you don't want to throw away. You can do a simple compost system in a 5-gallon bucket. So again, I'm all for using what you already have, but I'm also all for doing what works for you. So that's why I said, like in the beginning of the video, there's no one way that you absolutely have to do it. So yes, a compost accelerator you can definitely do. You can there's a lot of different ways you can do it. There are natural ways of accelerating your compost, whether it's adding a fertilizer that breaks it down faster. I believe I read that human manure or human urine, as long as you're not on any medications, can also break down your compost as well. It's called urea. I mean, it's in a lot of the fertilizers that you already have anyway, so that's always a possibility. Don't shoot the messenger, please, because I did mention that in my Get the Scoop on Poop. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can accelerate your compost pile. Seaweed is great. When I lived in South Florida, I got a bucket of seaweed, and I tossed it in my compost pile after rinsing it out, because you don't really want a bunch of salt in your compost. So something to consider as well. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can build healthy soil. Alrighty, everybody, any other questions before I go? I am Mary at Mary's Heirloom Seeds, for those of you who don't know. If you haven't already, please hit that thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I try to go live here every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central Time. For some reason, YouTube was wonky and it was saying I was going live at 6. In the description section of this video, you'll find my comprehensive planting guide. Oh, perlite versus vermiculite. I didn't answer that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So I am not 100% sure what vermiculite is made of. You got me on there, and thank you for reminding me. Perlite, if I remember correctly, I want to say that it's some sort of material that it's heated to where it expands and puffs up. When I always saw perlite, I always thought it was like styrofoam, but it's not. It's a natural resource that's heated to where it puffs up like that. So I don't have off the top of my head what vermiculite is compared to perlite. I do know that people use them interchangeably sometimes with their potting soil mix or their garden soil mix. And as soon as I finish this video, I'll have to look that up. Yes, thank you. Ash from volcanic material. Yes. So perlite is actually pretty good stuff. Vermiculite is also really good stuff. I just don't know off the top of my head what the material is based on. Whereas I did know perlite because somebody actually asked me that question not that long ago and I had the answer. Alrighty, everybody. Thank you for reminding me of that question that I completely forgot to answer. And if I missed anybody's questions, you could always send me an email to mary@marysheirloomseeds.com. See, that's one of the few times that I didn't have a specific answer for you. But as soon as I'm finished with this video, I will give you a specific answer right away. All right, everybody, I am going to sign off and go answer your question, and then I'm going to have a snack. I see Variations was just wondering. Thank you. I'll definitely share that information on the differences of the two. I do know what perlite is, but I also know that vermiculite and perlite are used interchangeably in mixes. So they're probably very, very similar. Whew. That's it. I hope you guys all have an amazing Thursday. Enjoy your amazing week. I hope it's warming up for you. It was 86 degrees, maybe 83 when I went live. Vermiculite is a mined material. See, Inga has the answer for you, but I'll give you a little longer of an answer probably. Alrighty, I'm signing off. Please make sure you enter our giveaway at marysheirloomseeds.com. Check out our seed sale as well, and check out the older videos on my manure because those are pretty awesome. I'm Mary at Mary's Heirloom Seeds signing off, and happy planting.